So we are just settling back in. We're still waiting for our clerk, but that was just a mic check for. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this May Council meeting. We are a little bit late getting started, but actually we began at 5 o'clock this evening, and we've had confidential first. So I am going to explain that we were in confidential for two items. 2.1 was the Interim Chief Administrative Officer and Treasurer Donna DeFilippis regarding the CAO recruitment update. And item 2.2, Director of Planning and Building Brian Treble and Tom Hanrahan from Sullivan Manny, and Katharina Richter, who's a Natural Resource Solutions, Inc. Our OLT mediation remaining policies. So both of those were verbal updates, but we do have a resolution. Mr. Clerk?
So the first was staff was given direction to proceed as in closed session, and then the motion I have here in front of me is for the second, which is a verbal update. That council received confidential item 2.2 for information. I'll need a mover and a seconder.
Thank you. So mover, Councillor Riley, and a seconder, Councillor Bradrick on Zoom. So
you got it.
Thank you. Okay, and the vote should be in front of you, councillors. Okay, and it's there. Okay, and that carries. And we did move back into open session while we were in closed session, so I'm going to begin this meeting by asking you to please stand for the singing of O Canada, tonight provided by Cairn Christian School. I will say that we used to try to limp along singing ourselves prior to COVID, and then through COVID it got pretty awful when we'd stand and you'd just see people's middle sections, and still it would sound pretty awful. So we did ask some local schools to provide O Canada singing for us. I think it's much nicer to listen to children, but certainly any time that you're in our council, we would be happy to have you sing along. So before beginning this meeting, I just have a few announcements. First of all, comments from the public for a matter that is on the agenda may be provided in person by attending the meeting and advising the chair during the request to address an item on the agenda section of the agenda. That's true for any meeting of our council. Number two, for those individuals that are unable to attend the meeting in person, you may always submit comments for matters that are on the agenda by either emailing jpaylove@westlincoln.ca before 4:30 on the day of the meeting. Comments submitted will be considered as public information and be part of a public record, or by contacting the Clerk's Department to request a Zoom link to attend the meeting virtually. And tonight's council meeting will be live streamed as well as recorded and available on the township's website. So I'll begin this evening with our land acknowledgement. The Township of West Lincoln, being part of Niagara Region, is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattaway-Wendourong, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Township of West Lincoln, as part of the Regional Municipality of Niagara, stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. And Councillor Trombetta, you have the opening petition now that I've... Is that the wrong one? Oh, okay. Well, 1 second.
Now I got to pull up my laptop and get the...
Wait, hold on. We have that also.
Thank you. I wasn't prepared. Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
But I am now.
Okay, good.
Ready? Thank you.
It's your turn.
We gather to make decisions for our communities. May we use only our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral, and we consider the merits and pitfalls of each matter that is placed before us. And may we act in accordance with what's best for our community and our fellow citizens.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So are there any changes in order of items on the agenda, members of council? No? Okay, I'm seeing none. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest? And seeing none. So number 8 is request to address items on the agenda. And note that requests to address items on the agenda are restricted to specific items as follows section 6.7 of the procedural bylaw. And there shall be no comments from the public permitted at council unless a specific appointment has been scheduled or an item is included under the other business or communications or appointments section of the agenda and relates to a matter which would normally be dealt with at committee. So are there any members of the public present who wish to address specific items on the agenda as permitted under 6.7 of the procedural bylaw? Okay. So we do have a public meeting this evening. And so this is a little different than a regular public meeting that we've had under the Planning Act. And so this meeting is a statutory public meeting on development charges. So this is May 27th. It was to start at 6:30, but we are running a little behind. The purpose of this public meeting being held under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act 1997 as amended. The purpose of the meeting is to give the public an opportunity to ask questions, provide comments, and make representations with respect to the 2024 Development Charge Background Study and proposed bylaw. Council will be considering the approval of the final bylaw at the July 15th, 2024 council meeting. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the study or bylaw, and comments from tonight will be taken into account by council in their consideration. So would the deputy clerk, and I guess it's you clerk, same thing, please advise the method and dates by which notice of the public meeting was given.
Proper notice was given by way of publication in local newspapers on May 2nd, 2024, as well as having been posted on the township website. Additionally, the draft background study and proposed bylaw were posted on the township website on May 13th, 2024.
Okay, so thank you. So prior to receiving comments from members of the public, we're going to ask our consultant, Byron Tan of Watson and Associates Economists Limited, to do a brief presentation of the findings of the study. So welcome, Byron. And thank you, Kevin, for getting that all set up.
Is this on?
So you're going to do that. I'm going to go to you. Whenever you're
Okay.
ready, Byron.
Oh,
Thank
perfect. Good evening, members of council, your worship, members of the public. Honored to be here tonight to provide you with the mandatory public meeting presentation as required under the Development Charges Act. As you can see on the screen here in front of you, we do have the agenda items for tonight. We've already dealt with the opening remarks. I'll provide a little bit of an overview as well as to the purpose of the public meeting. And then really just going down, some of the study process timelines that we're adhering to or what's already transpired to date, as well as giving members of the public a bit of an overview on on development charges. I did come here, I believe, a month ago to provide a presentation to council and the public. So this will be more again on the mandatory side within the Development Charge Act, but a lot of things here, if the public has not seen it yet, hopefully we'll provide a little bit of an overview as to what we're trying to achieve. And then lastly, we'll go through the proposed policies and the development charge rates as presented through the background study and as published on your website. And then subsequent to that, if there's any questions from the public, more than happy to hand it back over to you in order to canvass the room as well as online to see if there's any further questions. So with that being said, again, we're here tonight because we have to undertake the mandatory public meeting, which is a requirement under the Development Charge Act, in order for a municipality to consider a bylaw for the imposition of development charges. There's a number of steps that need to be undertaken. The first few steps have already been complete, and that's with the culmination of the background study, which, as the clerk had mentioned, was released back on May 13th. And we are here today adhering to the timelines where we are having a mandatory public meeting a minimum of 2 weeks after the release of that study. And we're going to consider council will consider the bylaw at least a minimum of 60 days subsequent to the release of the background study. Now, just a reminder, a refresher for those in attendance from the prior meetings. We had worked with the township and the staff dating back to July of last year. Since that time, we've put together a number of data sets going through your master plans, capital budgets, et cetera, to really inform the background study over this, a 10-month period. So we undertook the data collection, multiple meetings with staff in the different departments, undertook different scenarios for calculations of the development charges, and as well met with staff with respect to policies that would be informing your final version of your bylaw that you'll be considering in July. Since that time, we had met with the development community, and that was held on April 18th, 2024. So we met with the stakeholders, within the region, as well as those that, will be, have some development works in line for the township. We met at the recreation center across the street from this municipal office, and as I said, provided them a presentation as well as the draft calculations that were presented to you. Subsequent to that, as I mentioned, we were here at the council workshop, again, provided members of council and members of the public with the background and the process of the development charge study. So everything here today really is more putting all that together. And, as the deputy clerk had mentioned, we had released the final background study on May 13th, 2024. And then we are here today for the mandatory public meeting and a council consideration of the bylaw on July. And my understanding is staff will also be working with council through the month of June to be able to go through some of those policies as well for your decision-making prior to that July date. Now, as part of the development charge background study and the eligible services that we examined, as you can see here, there's a list of 19 services that could be undertaken or at least imposed through a municipal DC bylaw. The ones that we're noting in this teal or blue color, that's what's been included as part of your draft background study, final background study and draft bylaw. So that's with respect to water, wastewater, stormwater, services related to highway, which is again your roads and related infrastructure, as well as public works, facilities, fleet and equipment. And then we also have fire protection, library, and parks and recreation. Now, just as a recap, I did touch upon this during the developer sessions as well as the council workshop. But as part of the recent legislation within the Development Charge Act, we had provided a number of information items relating to the explanation of these different bills that have transpired over the last 5 years. And most of these were actually incorporated as part of your 2022 DC update. So, namely, Bill 108 all the way down to Bill 109. Those were all, incorporated as part of your DC study back in 2022 when we had undertaken that update study. So just as a refresher, Bill 108 provided a number of provided a number of payments, a number of payments for rental housing, institutional developments, as well as nonprofit housing. So those items were included as part of the amended bylaw back in 2022. Bill 138, it was a minor change. Essentially what it did was remove the requirement of these annual payments provisions for industrial and commercial. So initially they were part of Bill 108, then it was removed. Bill 197, that was a larger change to the bill. So that introduced, you could see the list of 19 services that you saw in the previous slide. Historically, it was actually 20 services, but because of Bill 23, housing services have been removed. So the slide you saw before is actually the most up-to-date. As well, Bill 197 also introduced a number of exemptions, administrative changes, as well as the introduction of being able to look at classes of services. And what that means is you're allowed to take any of those 19 services and essentially create one service that's made up of those different services. And what I mean by that is, for example, some municipalities may have like a bylaw enforcement that may have, it takes care of, let's say, water, wastewater, and roads, so they can create, a class under the Provincial Offences Act, which would then be a class of service, which could be considered in the future. And then Bill 213, that made a change to the Colleges and Universities Acts, where essentially if you are a university receiving operating funds from upper levels of government, then any developments on those lands would be exempt from DCs. So it wasn't a change within the Development Charge within the Development Charge Act. However, it does affect municipalities' ability to impose DCs with respect to those lands. Bill 109, very minor in terms of, it didn't affect the Act in terms of policies. However, it did have a number of requirements for your finance and treasury team for reporting to the province. So now those treasurer statements are a little bit longer than what they used to be historically. And then Bill 23 and Bill 134, those are the current bills that we're working through right now, which is really the crux of the update for 2024, and those are actually on the next slide in terms of a summary. So just to provide you with a little bit of a flavor here, with respect to Bill 23/Bill 134, a number of exemptions, reductions, as well as changes to the Development Charges Act were proposed and or implemented, depending on the timing and the type of revision. So the first two, the affordable housing owned and rental exemptions and the attainable housing exemptions, these are not in force yet. We are still waiting for the bulletin to be released by the province in order for it to be in effect. However, as of mid-April of 2024, so just last month, the province did release the affordable housing thresholds for West Lincoln, amongst other municipalities all throughout Ontario. So the notion here is that the affordable housing exemptions will be coming online as of June 1st, based on the bulletin that was released by the province. Now, with respect to attainable housing, that has not been released yet, so we are still waiting to see what will come about with respect to the attainable housing exemptions. And I'll talk about the affordable housing on the next slide, because that deserves a slide on its own, because there's a lot of moving parts there. The rest of the items on this list, they are in effect right now. Some of them are in effect regardless of whether you updated your bylaw. The others do come into effect the moment we pass a new bylaw come July. So I'll just go through some of these. So the nonprofit housing exemptions, those are in effect immediately. And essentially, any municipalities that may have had those annual payments, as I mentioned, from Bill 108 for nonprofit housing, they would cease to be imposed upon as of November 28, 2022. So that's something which would be an immediate reduction in terms of revenues for municipalities that collect for nonprofit housing. Inclusionary zoning exemptions. So if there's any affordable units within these inclusionary zoned zoning exemption areas, they will be 100% exempt from DCs. The additional residential unit exemptions. Well, essentially what Bill 23 did was just reword the additional residential unit exemptions by changing the definitions to remove the qualifiers of the size of these expansions. Now it's just quantity. So for example, a single detached home can add up to 2 apartments, period. Whereas before, it used to say, a single detached home can add, 2 apartments as long as it doesn't more than double the size of the home. So very distinct changes in terms of Bill 23. Rental housing discounts, so that's another one that's been introduced, where if you were to get a development application or a building permit application, where it is identified that all of the units within the building are purpose-built rentals, so a minimum of 4 units, and they're all purpose-built rentals, they would get a discount on the DC based on the number of bedrooms. So for example, a 1-bedroom or less gets 15%, 2 bedrooms get a 20% discount, and then 3 bedrooms or more get a 25% discount on the development charges. As I mentioned earlier, the housing services, that was part of the original Bill 197 allowance for DC services. That's been removed as per Bill 23. Doesn't impact the township, but it does impact Niagara region because they used to collect for housing. In terms of the capital cost amendments, there's a couple of nuances here, but I'll kind of explain it afterwards. But essentially, Bill 23 restricted the ability for municipalities to include studies as part of the recovery for development charges. I have that highlighted because I'll talk about that in a moment, as well as land. So land was not included, was proposed to be not allowed to be included within the development charge calculations. However, the way it was worded in the Development Charge Act is that it would be prescribed as per the minister in the province. Well, they never prescribed which services would be ineligible for land. So until they do such at such a time, we are still including land as part of your capital items until we're told otherwise, so we can't anymore. And then the big one here is the mandatory phase-in of the DCs. So once you pass a new bylaw, or any bylaw post Jan 1, 2022, the DCs must be phased in. Year 1, from when you pass that bylaw, it goes down to 80% of the calculated charge. And then from year 2 onwards, then it goes to 85%, 90%, 95%, and 100. Essentially, on an annual basis, it gets increased by 5% per year until you get to year 5 to expiry, where you can get to the 100%. Now, I would like to note that you are still allowed to index your charges, even though you are subject to the phase-in. So in year 2, you can go to 85% plus inflation, whatever the index rates are for the non-residential building construction price index. And then another thing that they've added is the ability for municipalities to only impose an interest rate up to a prescribed amount. So historically, you were allowed to add interest costs to those annual payments, such as the rental and the institutional, as well as those rate freezes. So as part of Bill 108, if a development came in and applied for site plan or zoning bylaw application, then they're allowed to have their DC rates frozen up to a period of 2 years. Now, that frozen rate could be subject to interest based on your interest rate policy, whatever that may be. Most of the municipalities within Niagara probably just follow what the region does in terms of an interest rate. Some may differ. It's up to the municipality at that point. However, this maximum interest rate then says you can only charge a maximum of the average prime rate of the prior quarter plus 1 percentage point. So for example, if the average prime rate was 7.2%, then your maximum interest could be 8.2%. So just plus 1. And then the DC bylaw, so that's been extended from 5 years to 10. Although I have mentioned in my previous presentations that I would urge municipalities to at least monitor the capital costs as well as the tender prices that you are incurring over that time horizon. Just because what we've examined over the past few years, especially through COVID and into our new norm nowadays, is that the DCs, while they are allowed to index, it's not indexing at a rate that would cover your increase in expenditures, whether that's through contracts, tenders, again, capital estimates, et cetera. So if you're only sticking with, one bylaw up to the 10 years, I would urge to at least do that gap analysis, because if you're only just doing indexing but your costs are increasing, then you're now having a funding gap over time. So that's something just to consider. And then one last thing, there's other administrative changes. Again, so through the Treasury Department, a number of items that they have to do as part of their treasurer statement, which again just adds to the laundry list of things to report to the province and to the council. So with respect to the development charges changes for affordable and attainable definitions, Bill 23 was amended by Bill 134 to change the definitions of affordable rental and affordable owned. So again, I mentioned this in my prior, presentation, but I'll just review it again for the members of the public that weren't there at that time. So with Bill 23, what was proposed to be affordable, whether it's rental or owned, was where rent or the price of the home would be no more than 80% of either, again, the average market rent or the average purchase price. Since that time, which was back in November 28, 2022, fast forward to December 4, 2023, and Bill 134 came out to essentially revise that affordability clause to include an income qualifier. So now the affordable rental unit then is only considered affordable if the rent is less than 30% of the 60th percentile of income for rental households or the average market rent set out in the new bulletin. Alternatively, for the owned units, the cost is to be less than 30% of the 60th percentile of income of households in the municipality, or 90% of the purchase price as defined in the new bulletin. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Ontario, the province did release the figures, for all municipalities as well as yourselves. And for an affordable housing unit, for a housing unit to be considered affordable within West Lincoln, the sell price must be less than or equal to $441,900. So if it's $441,900 or less, then it would be considered affordable, and they would get a DC exemption. Similarly, with affordable rental units, depending on whether it's a studio apartment all the way up to a 3-bedroom, that rent varies between $949 all the way up to $1,484 per month in terms of rent. So if it falls within that threshold, then it would be considered affordable, again, depending on the unit type. And as I mentioned, attainable units, they have not been defined yet by the legislation, so we'll keep you apprised once we know more information when that time comes. Now, in terms of the pending changes to the Development Charge Act, last month on April 10th, and I believe I presented this to Council as well at the end of April, the province gave, reading to Bill 185, Cutting the Red Tape to Build More Homes Act. So the bill proposes a number of changes to about 15 different pieces of legislation, but for our purposes today, the main item here is with respect to the Development Charge Act. And their proposed changes to the DCA has to do with the re-inclusion of studies back into the calculations into the fold. So while Bill 23 removed all studies from the DC, Bill 185 proposes to put them all back in. So we are going to be working with staff, at least at a cursory level, to at least generate a listing of studies similar to what was identified in the last development charge study, as well as any other master plans or other studies you're about to undertake in the future. And have those calculations ready so that way, if Bill 185 does get released, as stated, then at least we'll be able to, move quickly because there is only a small transition period in order to be able to allow you to make minor amendments to your development charge bylaw. The next big one was also the removal of the mandatory phase-in of those charges. So remember what I said, once you pass a new bylaw, you dropped on to 80 and then 85, 90, et cetera. Well, Bill 185 proposes to remove that exemption, or sorry, that phase-in. So that's something we'll be monitoring to see if that still is true, in the coming months. As I mentioned, with this new bill, there is a process for minor amendments to the DC bylaw. So you would be able to make the changes to your bylaw to add back studies, change the dates for the phase-in, et cetera. And as the proposed changes read, you would be able to do that without having to go through the whole public process. So, this whole mandatory public meeting or, the appeal period for the bylaw. Now, there will still be a meeting required in order for you to, bless those updates. However, that would not be as rigorous as what we're doing now. And then there are also a couple of other items that have been proposed as part of Bill 185. And that's with the reduction of the rate freeze related to site plan applications and zoning bylaw amendments. So right now, if any of these development applications come through, you must provide a frozen rate, DC rate of 2 years with interest. The proposal here aims to reduce that time frame to 18 months. So that's something where, the province is looking for these type of developments to move quickly rather than wait the full 2 years. And there's also a couple of other items, modernizing the public notice requirements. So for some municipalities that don't have local newspapers, you will be allowed now to do a little bit more on the modern side and actually post it online via certain mediums. And then lastly, as I mentioned earlier, the implementation of the affordable residential unit exemptions. As of right now, it is anticipated to be in effect as of June 1. So I mentioned this in my prior meetings as well, but there is this relationship between the need to service growth versus funding. So typically, with this diagram, really it comes down to, if you do have new users, you will require new infrastructure. And in order to fund that infrastructure, there's really only a few different revenue tools at municipalities' disposal. It's either you have development charges, which you are allowed through under the Development Charges Act to impose a bylaw, or if you don't want development charges or a reduction thereof, then really your only recourse then to fund these said infrastructure works is through property taxes, water, wastewater rates, existing reserves, user fees, et cetera. So it's just this is really more that balancing act of, where do you want to see the funding come from to the extent possible and allowable. With some municipalities, they don't have to have DCs, but again, if you're building all this infrastructure, then it hits the existing taxpayers, existing ratepayers as well. Just as a recap on the methodology for calculating development charges, the Act has over 80 clauses, hundreds of subclauses, makes for great nighttime reading. But right here, right now, we have we've summarized that into 6 steps. The first is to identify the amount, type, and location of growth. So we work with the planning staff. We take a look at your master plans, official plans, development applications, et cetera, to determine the amount of growth, the type of growth, res, non-res, singles, multiples, apartments, et cetera, as well as the location, which in your case primarily is within the Smithville area. Then from there, we work with staff to identify the servicing needs to accommodate that growth. Now, as you recall from the previous presentations, the majority of the servicing needs, as well as the capital costs identified in number 3, are based on the your master community plan for Smithville. So a lot of that was coming from that work, as well as any work that may have been identified through staff, capital budgets, et cetera. So, as I said, number 2, servicing needs to accommodate growth. Number 3 is the capital in order to provide for those servicing needs. And they sound similar, but they are slightly different. So number 2 would then say, okay, if I'm growing by 20,000 people, I need parks and recreation services, right? But then number 3 then says, well, to meet that parks and recreation services, what type of capital do we need? Is it going to be a splash pad? Is it going to be a soccer field? Is it going to be another arena? So at the end of the day, you're meeting the servicing need of providing parks and recreation, but the capital is actually the infrastructure to support that, that initiative. Once we identify those capital costs, we have a number of deductions we must adhere to as per the Development Charge Act. So if you have any grants, subsidies, or other contributions, whether it be from the development community, the province, the region, et cetera, those need to be deducted from the calculations. And then for all of the services or all of the capital, we have to also take a look at the benefit to the existing community and the benefit to existing development. So if there are certain works that would benefit, let's say a deficiency or some type of the existing community, then that's something that we would reduce from the calculations. However, if it's primarily driven by growth and you wouldn't need that project unless growth occurred, then that is attributable to growth and therefore no BTE would be attributed, or a very nominal amount. So again, this is on a case-by-case basis depending on the nature of the project. And then we have the amounts in excess of the service standard. So what we do for all services, except for water, wastewater, storm, is we have to do a 15-year inventory calculation, what's called a service standard, where we then take a look at what are the levels of service you provided over the last 15 years, because what you want to provide in the future can be no higher than the average amount you provided in the past on a per capita basis. It's a simple mathematical equation. This is different than, let's say, your levels of service you want to strive for or aim for as part of your master plans. This is just, here's your inventory, here's your population, and here's how your levels of service has changed, simply from an investment standpoint or inventory standpoint. And then lastly, development charge reserve funds. So from one bylaw to the other, you've been collecting DCs, from developers, from your prior bylaws. So if you do have any development charges surpluses because you've collected but you just haven't spent the money yet on a particular project because you don't have all the funds yet or you just wanted to wait before you initiate that construction, then we would reduce these amounts from the calculations. So any surpluses would then be deducted from the overall capital program. Similarly, if you had a deficit because you've accelerated certain projects and you had to take on debt, which then drove your reserve funds into a negative, we can then include those negative amounts as part of the recovery because now you have to pay yourself back for cash flowing the DC reserve funds. So that's something that we also make the adjustments for. So after those amounts, we then have a net cost that we allocate between residential and non-residential growth. And then from there, we divide those two amounts by the growth forecast. So we have the growth for the residential, and we have the cost for res to get us a residential DC. And similarly for the non-res, again, the cost divided by the growth to get a non-res DC. So this slide then just provides you a little bit of that overview. Again, all those costs, once we separate out between res and non-res, divided by the growth forecast to get a charge per unit. On the residential side, it's typically a charge per singles and semis, multiples, which is your townhouses, and then apartments. And then on the non-residential side, it's typically done on a per square foot basis because that's where we're charging is to the building where the employees will be working. Development charges are not full cost recovery. There's a number of exemptions, reductions that municipalities have to adhere to. And what you're seeing on the screen here is a list of the mandatory exemptions that you must adhere to as you're administering the development charge bylaw. So for example, there's the upper lower tier governments and school boards. So if Niagara Region were to come into the township and build a facility, you can't charge them a DC. Likewise, if you built something, you wouldn't pay the regional DC. School boards, they're higher in the pecking order. They're from the province, so they don't pay the municipal DCs. Industrial building expansions. So an industrial building under the Development Charge Act is allowed to enlarge up to 50% of its building without having to pay a DC. Now, we do draw the line in the sand, so that's a one-time exemption. We don't want this abused where you have an industrial development come in with 100,000 square feet going to 150. The following year, go up and take another 75,000 permit and go up to 225, and then so on and so forth in perpetuity. So it is a one-time exemption. And then for all the other ones, I've mentioned this through the prior slides, with the development of lands on a university, as well as all the ones from Bill 23. So that's there for, for illustrative purposes. Now, in terms of the discretionary exemptions, municipalities do have the ability to add on top any mandatory exemptions that are imposed by the province. So a municipality can elect to reduce the development charges in whole or in part for either certain types of developments, classes, or even services. So for example, if you wanted to exempt a type like churches, then you can have them fully exempted. But then you can also get even more granular and say it's only the place of worship portion, but any meeting rooms that would be rented out to, say, a Montessori school or a daycare, that would be charged because that's more of a commercial use rather than a place of worship. Alternatively, industrial, if you'd like, you can either, discount it 50%, 25%, 100%, or again, that's just one example. And then with respect to other stuff too, we can also include a mandatory phase-in if the charge is going, from zero to something where the municipality never had a DC before, or if you feel that the development charge is a significant amount, then again, council has the ability to phase in where appropriate. Bill 23 has forced you to phase in, but if you want to do anything more than that, that is up to council's discretion. And then as well, we have redevelopment credits. So these are not within the Development Charge Act, but they are cited through case law. So for example, if I had a single detached home and my house burnt down, knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't, I should be allowed a period of time to rebuild that home without having to pay a DC. And typically it's about a 5-year time horizon between the demolition or the the accident up until the redevelopment of the home. Similarly, if the units or the the development is going from one type to the other to another, there should be credits attributed because there was already a building there before. So, for example, if you had a single detached home, and let's say your single detached rate was $30,000, and you want to build 3 townhouses, let's say at $20,000 each, then the DC payable, while it's $20,000 times the 3 townhomes, the fact that I'm tearing down a single that would have paid a DC of $30,000, then it's the 60 minus the 30,000. So therefore, the net payable is only $30,000. And that also works whether you're going from residential to non-res or vice versa, non-res to residential. Now, keep in mind, any exemptions provided or do need to be funded, from other sources other than the DCs. Because again, you are consciously reducing the amounts that you're collecting. However, the quantum of the charge was based on infrastructure costs that were proposed to be constructed and undertaken over the forecast period of the life of the bylaw, as well as the development charge background study. So that is something to keep in mind with any exemption. Your township's current discretionary exemptions. So we have maintained this within the DC bylaw, but again, this is up for council's consideration. So right now we have maintained the cemeteries and burial grounds, the places of worship, garden suites, agricultural uses, and then the housing projects that are initiated by Niagara Region. So some of this may already overlap with with Bill 23/Bill 134 in terms of affordable housing, but either way, we're still maintaining it right now because this is something you currently provide. And then lastly, the canopies, including gas stations and those intended for parking and loading and unloading of vehicles, have been included for a discretionary exemption. In terms of the local service policy, so if you recall from my presentation about a month ago, we do have what's called a local service policy appendix within the background study, and this outlines the responsibility of the developer versus what would be included in the development charge study that would be the responsibility of the township. So we do go through different types of services, whether it's roads, traffic signals, street lights, water mains, park requirements, etc., and draw the line in the sand as to what would be really a developer responsibility, which typically aligns with your subdivision agreements and all of your other agreements that you enter into with these development communities, versus what you'd like to include as a DC recovery, which would be paid by the broader group. Now, just going into the specifics of the development charge study, as you can see here, our growth forecasts, we have about 3 different time periods, 2 of which are the same, but I'll explain about it in a minute. But essentially, we have our 10-year forecasts, So this is typically with your softer services, like parks and recreation, library, et cetera. So we're looking at a net population increase of just over 7,100 people over this time span. And that translates to about, just under 2,860 homes. And from a employment standpoint, that looks at just over 1 million square feet of non-residential development. And this is broken down into industrial, commercial, institutional. Now, in terms of the longer-term forecasts, we look at what's called a build-out. So really looking at the master plans, especially for Smithville, and what is the final form at the end of the day in order to service the upcoming or the anticipated growth within that area. So we have what's called a build-out, which is really more of your roads and public works. So then this would benefit really the township as a whole. And we're looking at just under 21,800 individuals coming into the township. And that's about just over 8,700 new homes. Again, this is a mixture of singles, multiples, and apartments. And with that being said, we are looking to also service roughly 2.9 million square feet of non-residential. So this could be industrial development, commercial, again, a lot of retail that tends to follow, residential homes, and then institutional as well. And then we have what's called an urban build-out. And what this is, these are the potential population and employment that would be serviced with water and wastewater. So this is only the ones that would have the water and wastewater servicing. So you can see we're just over 22,500 individuals, just under 8,700 residential homes, and then just over 2.7 million square feet of non-residential buildings. Now, in terms of your current DC rates, as you can see, you do provide for a number of services, which I mentioned earlier. And in total, if you were building within the township with full services, including water, wastewater, and storm, we're looking at about just over $16,000 per home. Historically, if you were just building in the rural area without water, wastewater, storm, it's just over $14,100. As you go left to right of the chart, depending on the number of individuals living in these homes, the quantum of the charge drops. So for a townhouse or a multiple, again, that drops to just under $10,700. And then depending the size of the bedroom of the apartment, then we're looking at just under $10,200 or just over $6,300 for a one bedroom or less. And then you also, on the non-residential side, you charge about $4 per square foot for all services. And you also have a charge for wind turbines. So that's typically tied to services related to highway, which again, road access in order to have access to the wind turbines, as well as fire protection. So if anything were to happen, I would hope that, you would hope that the fire department with the fire chief and the crews go and actually respond, so that way they're still operational. And then historically, we also had studies allocated to them, but you'll see this time around that that's been removed because Bill 23 removed the ability to recover for studies. Now, in terms of the proposed development charge calculations this time around, again, this is based on information primarily stemming from the Smithville Urban Master Plan, which again, a large portion of it is investments towards the roads, infrastructure, public works, as well as wastewater. So you can see there that in total, the township-wide cost, if you're in the rural area, would be about $28,600. However, if you're looking at full services, including water, wastewater, and storm, we're about $24,260. And as I mentioned, going left to right, depending on the unit size, there's less people living in them, therefore the corresponding charge is also decreasing. So for a multiple or a townhome, we're looking at about $23,457. And then on the apartments, the 2 bedrooms plus, we're just over $21,900. And then for the bachelor and 1 bedroom apartments, just over $14,200. We've also included a new category called special care, special dwelling units. So this would encompass, any dwelling unit that would not be captured under singles, multiples, or apartments. So this could be your retirement homes, like your Chartwell. So we charge on a per room basis. So that's something that we're including for your consideration. And then in terms of the non-residential piece, as you can see here, for the traditional industrial, commercial, institutional, we're looking at $10.96 per square foot for full services. And then in addition to wind turbines, through speaking with township staff, it was identified to also include solar farms. So these are the large solar PVs, in addition to the wind turbines, to have a potential development charge recovery. And again, in similar light to the current imposition of the DCs, we are only looking at imposing the roads as well as the fire amounts. Now, the roads is actually a 50% of the total, and that was just to highlight that there is a little bit of a discount for the services related to highway as it relates to these type of assets. Now, at the end, just in my last few slides here, in terms of the actual rate comparison, as you can see here, the largest amount has to do with the roads and public works portion. So again, going from $6,800 to $18,700. And again, that's because of all of the projects that were identified through that master plan process. We also have, an increase in the fire, but again, with the additional, units that are coming online, there's a number of infrastructure, a number of vehicles that need to be purchased in order to service, basically the incoming individuals and businesses within the Smithville area. Parks and Recreation, really that's kind of similar to what is currently being provided now. However, should the township undertake a updated master plan, that number may change depending on the type of need as well as the type of recreation requirements that would be required by the township in the coming years. Library, again, that's essentially stayed somewhat similar. Really, you could probably look at that more as inflation rather than anything. And then with respect to growth studies, again, that's been removed from the calculations. And then on the urban services, there is a slight reduction in stormwater. There's only a small amount left to be recovered. Moving forward, most stormwater works will be the responsibility of the local developments to be putting as part of their localized sites. But the largest component is wastewater, because there's a lot of trunk mains, a lot of pumping stations, et cetera, that need to be constructed, and that's reflected with this amount. And then with water services, while it was thought of that there was going to be a number of items to be constructed by the township, through the identification through the master plan, a lot of them appeared to be more local service in nature, and that's why the charge has gone down on the water side. And if we are looking at the Bill 23 phase-in, if you were to implement the bylaw come July 15th, that $34,261 immediately drops down to $21,409 if the phase-ins are still maintained. Now, in terms of the non-residential comparison, again, similar story to the residential piece. Again, the largest increases with respect to services related to highway, as well as wastewater services. So going from $4 to $10.96 per square foot. And again, with the 80% phase-in, that would drop down to $8.77 the first year. Now, in terms of the comparators between yourselves as well as the other local area municipalities, as you can see here, fairly evenly spread throughout Niagara region. You can see the ones in the hatched lines. These municipalities have either released their study or have already passed their bylaw. I believe out of all of them, only one has actually passed their bylaw. The rest have just released their studies. Hence, it still says calculated. So you'll see that there's a number of them with Lincoln, just about $70,000. Niagara Falls, they released their study. All in, they're about just under $65,000. You got Pelham, and then yourselves. Fort Erie, Welland, Thorold, et cetera. And I believe there's a number of other municipalities on the right-hand side of this table that are also looking to be updating their development charges in the coming, in the foreseeable future. Now, just to explain the charts, I know I have the legend up there, but essentially the small sliver that you could barely see on the screen at the very bottom, it should be in green, but since it's the smallest amount, that is with respect to the education development charges. So the school boards, are allowed to impose a DC. So that's that small sliver in green that you could probably barely see as part of my tables. The next one is the upper tier charges. So this is Niagara region. So you can see it's fairly uniform across the board, except for Waynfleet, because Waynfleet does not have water and wastewater. Therefore, they don't pay the regional water and wastewater DCs. And then lastly, the lower tier charges. So you can see that fluctuates, from all these different local area municipalities. And then, as I said, the hatch line is with the 80% phase-in. So if you were to remove that hatch line, that's really where you would be if I were to resort this table. But for illustrative purposes, I think it was better to show what the full calculated is for everybody at the end of the day. In terms of the commercial square footage, as you can see here, again, similar story. You're currently right now to the right of the bar graph. However, with the full phase-in, even with the 80%, even excluding the 80% phase-in, you'd be right in the middle compared to all of your other comparators. Again, the highest one being Lincoln, then Welland, and then the proposed right now with Pelham and Niagara Falls, and then Thorold. In terms of industrial, as you can see, you're really in the middle of the pack, and then this will just bring you back, middle left of the rest of the comparators. Again, with similar municipalities above you, Pelham, Niagara Falls, Lincoln. So that concludes my presentation. As I said, we are looking to have council consider the bylaw on July 15th. But in between that time, there are going to be, I believe, another council session to review the draft bylaw for your consideration.
Thank you, Byron. That was a very lengthy but very thorough presentation, and we do thank you for that. So I'm going to move on now. I do know, under the public comment session, that we did receive correspondence today, so I'm going to go to the clerk to make sure that that's entered into the record.
Just noting for public record, we did receive something from Phelps Homes, a John White, with questions and concerns for staff, which staff will have in the public record in the minutes that will be reflected at the end there, and as well will be answered by staff.
Okay, thank you. So further to that, are there any oral or written submissions from anyone present in the meeting, either in person or on Zoom, regarding the 2024 Development Charge Background Study? So I'm just looking, and I don't see Kevin. There's nobody online, just Councillor Broderick, I think. Okay, so just to complete that, if any members of the public in attendance at this public meeting would like to make comments and/or provide written comments, they should do so now by using one of the two options. So just to make sure, option 1, using a computer or smartphone, select the raise your hand control that can be found on the Zoom options list displayed on your screen. Or option 2, using a landline or telephone, dial 9 or star 9, and this will notify staff that you've raised your hand. And once you've been acknowledged to speak, so please unmute your microphone. But I don't see anyone coming forward, and I don't see anyone online, and Kevin, you verified that. So I'm going to go to members of council. So this, members of council, is your opportunity. If anyone has any oral or written submissions with respect to the 2024 Development Charge Background Study, this is your opportunity to also ask those questions or make your comments. Okay. Okay. Seeing none, then I am going to declare that this meeting, having heard the comments, and only maybe they were yours, Byron, but we do thank you. This public meeting is now closed. Council consideration of the Development Charges Bylaw is scheduled to occur on July 15th, 2024. So this public meeting with respect to the 2024 Development Charges Background Study and Proposed Bylaw is concluded at the hour of 7:43. Thank you. And thank you, Byron.
Thank you very much.
You'll be glad when you hit the end of not having to repeat this over and over and over again, I'm sure, but we do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to item 10, which is another presentation on our agenda this evening. 10.1 is Scott Fraser, Frank Tassoni, and Magid Elmadoun from the Niagara region, read the Niagara Escarpment Crossing Comprehensive Environmental Assessment Project Update. So, good night, Byron, thank you. So we'll let these gentlemen stretch their legs a minute and get your thing set up. Welcome to West Lincoln. I don't know, have you either of you been before to West Lincoln? Yep. Okay, good. Good. Well, welcome back then. And actually, from my seat at council, I only ever see the tops of your heads unless you're presenting at the podium. So it's actually nice to see a full face. Okay. Okay, Frank, you going?
Okay, hello, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to discuss the Niagara Escarpment Crossing. My name is Frank Tassoni. I'm the Director of Transportation Services at Niagara Region, and tonight I have with me other members of the project team, being Scott Fraser, our Associate Director of Transportation Planning, and Magid Elmadoun, our Manager of Transportation Planning. Well, I expect that many of you are very familiar with this initiative. For those that are coming at this for the first time, the Niagara Escarpment Crossing is a proposed new road in West Niagara that will look to improve goods movement capacity and redirect truck traffic away from residential areas such as downtown Grimsby and Beamsville, and provide a more direct link between the QEW and West Lincoln. This differs from the future proposed east-west Niagara-Hamilton trade corridor that will connect the GTA and the border to South Niagara. That remains a future planning initiative and one that will be discussed in the next update of our transportation master plan. Tonight's presentation is about consultation and hearing your feedback. We know that this is a project that is of great interest to West Lincoln Council and your residents, and so we're here tonight to provide you with an update, address some of the most common concerns we've heard thus far, hear your comments, and incorporate your input as we look to move this project forward in the coming months. So with this in mind, tonight we plan to cover a refresher of why the project is being considered, a summary of some of the history and past planning and activities, discuss the comprehensive environmental assessment process, how it differs from the more familiar municipal class environmental assessment process, and the work completed on the terms of reference, and discuss what comes next, including our ongoing consultation. I'll now turn things over to Scott, who will take us through some of the details.
Thank you. So thanks, Frank. So why is the region considering a new road at West Niagara? The goal of the project is to consider a new north-south link between the QEW and Highway 20, one that would be more suitable for truck traffic than the existing crossings of the escarpment, such as Regional Road 12, which is Mountain Road in Grimsby, and Regional Road 18 at Mount Street in Lincoln. These existing crossings have challenges that make them undesirable for truck traffic, including steep grades, limited room for trucks to make turns, and proximity to residential neighborhoods. The creation of a new link would address many of those concerns by redirecting truck traffic away from those existing crossings, improving both the region's goods and movement capacity, as well as improving safety and quality of life in West Niagara. The idea of a new road in Niagara, or West Niagara, is one that's been considered before. One of the most common questions we've been received on this project is, why is this study necessary, given the past planning that has occurred on this initiative? So to address that issue, I think it's important to quickly recap some of that activity. In 2016, Regional Council received a report that identified an extension of Bartlett Avenue and the Park Road corridor was the preferred route for this road, and the project be advanced as a municipal Class C environmental assessment. That recommendation was reflected in the Transportation Master Plan of the region in 2017 as well. However, in preparation for that work, staff identified that the project was unlikely to be successful if it advanced as a Class C EA. The primary challenges that were identified was obtaining the necessary approvals from the Niagara Escarpment Commission and the risk of objections to the environmental impacts of the project. And so between 2017 and 2018, staff investigated alternative ways to move the project forward, arriving at the recommendation of a comprehensive environmental assessment in 2020. What's important to take away here is that while these previous studies provide important background to the study that we're undertaking this time, those previous studies were never formally completed or submitted to the ministry, and so this comprehensive environmental assessment represents a new planning initiative. So briefly on what a comprehensive environmental assessment is and how it differs from the normal processes the region follows for most road projects. A CEA approach is used when a project is anticipated to require enhanced levels of consultation due to the scale of the project and the associated environmental impacts. A CEA is carried out in two phases. First, we develop what is known as a terms of reference for the project. And the terms of reference is really the roadmap for how the future environmental assessment itself will be carried out. By developing the terms of reference up front, it gives us the opportunity to consult with all interested parties, local councils, public, concerned residents groups, the agencies that we will ultimately need to seek approval from in advance of commencing the study. So there's agreement up front on how that study will be conducted and that it's looked at in a comprehensive manner and all the factors we need to take into account are laid out in advance. And so where we're at is that staff have prepared the first draft of that terms of reference for this project and are ready to begin the consultation phase on that document. We'll be circulating the draft terms of reference to these parties for their review over the coming weeks, beginning on Thursday of this week. And that's when it will come to West Lincoln staff for their review. In terms of what is included in the terms of reference, I mentioned it's about setting out the roadmap for the future, how the future EA will work. That includes setting out the goals and objectives for the project, the study area and alternatives, the technical work plan, and the consultation plan for the EA itself. In terms of those technical work plans, these will cover a wide range of studies. I won't read them all off the slide, but suffice to say they cover the full spectrum of transportation, environmental, social, and financial factors you would expect to see in a study of this size. There are two particular areas of the terms of reference that I think it's important to highlight for you this evening. First is the alternatives to be considered. You will note that we are proposing 4 alternatives to be considered. First, the do nothing, which is a common or required element to look at in any environmental assessment because it serves as the base case of where we are today. Second, the implementing additional traffic management measures on the existing crossings that exist today. So that's looking at what additional improvements we can make to Mountain Road, Ontario Street, and Bartlett Avenue as they exist today without considering other more impactful alternatives to see if those will meet the need overall in terms of the problem we've identified. Third is to extend Bartlett Avenue and Park Road corridor, and that is the alternative that was essentially addressed and included in the Transportation Master Plan in 2017. And lastly, to consider construction of a new or alternative corridor located somewhere else between between Grimsby and Deansville, and look at other alternatives are also feasible. Second, the proposed study area. And here I'll note what you're seeing on the screen is a larger study area than the one that was originally included in the notice of commencement. The reason for that is that the CA must demonstrate that it's examined all viable alternatives and consider the impact to surrounding areas. The change from the original notice of commencement was to widen it to include Mountain between Grimsby and Waynesville, between those 2 roads. As I mentioned, alternative 2 will look at improvements to those corridors. And so the wider study area is just to incorporate those links so that we can include them within the bounds of the study. As I mentioned earlier, the CEA represents a new planning initiative, and so it must investigate and demonstrate both the need for the new escarpment crossing, as well as show that other alternative solutions are not feasible. This includes those further improvements to Regional Road 12 and 18, or other alignments other than Bartlett Avenue. Investigating and demonstrating those 2 factors will be key criteria that the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, as well as the Niagara Escarpment Commission, look to when approving this project in the future. A CEA that predetermines a preferred outcome without undertaking that due diligence, or one that fails to consider impact to surrounding areas, would not be acceptable to those key approval agencies. And so while we expect that the CEA may reach many of the same conclusions as previous studies, it must do so and provide evidence as to why that's the case. So in terms of what comes next, we're beginning the consultation phase on the terms of reference. A number of interested parties have been consulted in the early development of the terms of reference, and those efforts are now going to expand. In terms of timelines, we've shared this update with the Region's Public Works Committee on May 7th. It was considered by full council last Thursday on the 23rd. We're of course here before yourselves tonight, having shared similar updates with Grimsby and Lincoln councils on the 15th and 21st respectively. This is going to be followed by a public information center to be held this Wednesday at the West Niagara Fairground. And I invite all interested parties to come to that event to hear more about the project as well. As I mentioned, starting on May 30th, this Thursday, we'll be sharing the full draft terms of reference on the Region's website, inviting all interested parties to review the full document over about a 6-week period that we'll be looking for review and feedback on the terms of reference itself. The project team will then be aggregating feedback from council tonight, the local council presentations in Grimsby and Lincoln, the Public Information Center on that terms of reference document itself, and doing a revision and incorporating appropriate comments as necessary. When that document's finalized, an update report will be shared with Regional Council, after which the terms of reference will be submitted to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. Subject to the anticipated approval by the Ministry, we'll then look to move forward into the environmental itself, beginning with the issuance of an RFP towards the end of this year or early next year. So with that, I will conclude the presentation and have to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation, Scott, and Frank as well. Questions from members of council? Councilor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I guess it's less of a question, it's more of a statement. I thank the presenters tonight for coming and making this presentation to our community. Madam Mayor, you and myself, as well as other members of council, we've gone to the delegations where we've been advocating for this, for safety, for efficiency, just to help, whether it's attracting new types of businesses to our community. So this is certainly something that's been long in the works, even before I think we were even advocating for this. So I think it's a very positive opportunity for our community. I look forward to see what the findings turn out to be over the next course of the year and a half, however long it ends up finally taking you guys to get to that point. But yeah, I just thought I would just make a comment for the sake of making a comment, because I think this is really good direction. So I look forward to seeing the results.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Broderick, I'm going to ask you if you have any comments that you want or any questions you want to ask so that we don't forget about you being online.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I listened with great interest in the presentation and look forward to hearing some more secured timelines for our community, as I know they're very anxious to see, a lot of them are very anxious to see a safer route to and from the QEW. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councilor Chichot.
I echo the comments of the two speakers previous to me, but I do have a question, and that would be the next steps end at early 2025. For me, it's most important to understand what the anticipated next steps are and the timing of how you come back and reply to us. Because as Councillor Riley has said, we were before several ministers advocating for this, only to find out that we had the cart before the horse. So how will we know and be included as time goes on beyond 2025?
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as I mentioned, starting Thursday, we will be sharing the draft terms of reference on the region's website. And over that 6 weeks is where we'll be looking for input from council and from staff here in West Lincoln. Depending on the scale of that feedback that we receive, we will then make a determination on the final consultation to take place on the terms of reference. But at this time, it's anticipated we would provide an update report back to Regional Council on the amendments to the terms of reference and inform them that we plan to proceed with filing that terms of reference. Once we receive approval from the minister, anticipated approval on the terms of reference, we will then go into an RFP. When that RFP is scheduled to be awarded, we will need to go back to Regional Council and as well to award that contract, as it's expected to exceed the threshold for our authority to award directly. And that will launch us into the environmental assessment itself. Within the terms of reference that will be shared with staff, there is an outline for the future consultation plan on the EA, and that will include further engagement with this council, of course, as the EA itself goes forward.
If I may, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to follow up, all of that's great, and I know that the region, and we have two people in this room tonight that actually report back to us, but can we be assured that we will get regular updates on this? Because it's, as Councillor Riley has said, this is very vital to the economic development of this community and to bringing goods out of this township and into it. So just knowing that the work is continuing is very important to us and shouldn't be dependent on our two representatives bringing it back to us. So if communication were both ways between the staff, our staff and the regions, that would be of great comfort. Thank you.
Anything further? So my question would be, of all of you, and both of you at this point in time, but even Regional Councillor Whitty might want to weigh in. So we have been advocating, so since 2016, I know this has gone on before that, but I have been every year at either AMO or Roma, talking about this issue. And it was only at Roma when we came last January in terms of a small municipality. We didn't go with our neighbors that time, although we alluded to their safety issues. We talked more about the economic value, and to our prosperity, our future prosperity, and the need to have our bypass and to have that eventually connect so that we have a safe way for people to get to the QEW. So I guess I want to know, is that moot now? Are we sitting back from that, or is that something we should be continuing to push for in terms of going to the ministry? I would really like to hear publicly your opinion on where, because we're at a point now, do we make a delegation again? Do we make a delegation this time to say thank you for finally looking into this, or do we just let it go knowing that we're at this stage in the process? So some advice, please.
Madam Mayor, if we could have the presenters turn their microphones on. It seems that members of the public are not able to hear them
Oh, dear.
very well.
Okay. So.
Yeah, and so that's a very good question, and what we would advise you tonight and what we'd have advised the other municipalities when we presented to them is that this is likely an unaffordable venture for the region on our own. And so we would wait for provincial and federal programs to become available in order to capitalize on the actual build of this project. So the stage that we're at now is to try and get the project to a point where we consider it to be shovel ready. Most programs that come forward have that requirement. And so it wouldn't be appropriate to advocate at this time, but when we have the design a portion ready, then we would appreciate our council and all other councils advocating for the project, as it will take a funding program to see this through to fruition.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, I think to add on to that too, I kind of feel like, maybe we don't have to attack it at every conference we go to, but I certainly think there's some value in still making some delegations, especially to like the Minister of Infrastructure, Minister of Finance, Minister of Transportation, like just keeping that going, because by the time this comes to fruition or this comes to being a reality, we don't really want to let anything kind of simmer at that point. We want to keep that fire lit. I guess my question to you, Madam Mayor, to the presenters is, and I might have missed this, so I apologize if I did. Once this is done, once you get through the assessment here, will it determine at the end of it the preferred route? Is that going to be something that you guys are going to come forward publicly and say, okay, we already know at the end of 1 year, or is that something that comes at a later date entirely? So could you just walk us through what we could expect there?
Yeah, and through the mayor, we expect that the preferred alignment will come earlier in the process. Once we have the terms of reference approved, which is likely going to happen towards the end of this year or early next year, and we hire a consultant to carry out that EA, we expect that timeline will be 2 to 3 years by the time the EA is completed, but we would hope to see a preferred alignment early in that process.
Amazing. No, thank you.
Any further questions from anyone? Okay, seeing none, I thank you very much for your presentation this evening. Thanks for coming out to West Lincoln. Yeah, so we do have a resolution attached to that, and so I need a mover. Councillor Trombetta, would you move that, please? Okay. And a seconder for the resolution, Councillor Riley, thank you. And so the resolution reads that the presentation from Scott Fraser, Frank Chisoni, and Majid El Mahoud, Niagara Region, regarding the Niagara Escarpment Crossing Comprehensive Environmental Assessment Project update be received for information. So do you have that? Okay, so that will come up on your screens, members of council, and it should be there. Did your vote come up?
Yes, it just.
Okay, okay, good. Okay. Okay, well, we didn't get the piece up there, but we did have it. Okay, all right, so we still have a little bit of technical difficulty, but I think that resolution passed, right? So we're good. Okay, so after a while, Regional Councillor Witteveen, it is your time up in the hot seat, so to speak. We've had a busy evening of presentations, so keep it as usual, Councillor Witteveen. We appreciate
Okay.
your remarks. Thank you.
Make sure the microphone is working, good evening, Mayor, members of council, staff, members of the public. I'd like to start by my report by sharing that I attended Queen's Park on the week of May 13th for Niagara Week. We had the opportunity to meet with Minister Vic Fedeli to discuss our Niagara Region project of the South Niagara Waste Water Treatment Plant in Niagara Falls. This large infrastructure project will service 115,900 new housing units and support approximately 9,200 new jobs in this expansion. It will also support the new South Niagara Hospital and the employment land surrounding the build. Secondly, we met later that day with Minister Andrea, I'm going to butcher it, Hanajin, to discuss climate change impacts on the plant. So we shared our many our climate challenges in this area that could be addressed through this capital project. We could have better control of wet weather flows and minimize the impact on the natural environment. The Niagara Region has initiated a RFP on the design of this plant with the interest of using the latest technology in the design. At this time, this project estimated cost is about $380 million. So this is why we're lobbying the province and the federal government for 1/3 cost share across these levels of government. And as many of you know, the following day we had an announcement, which was the Tuesday, of a $1.5 billion investment in Port Colborne by Asha Keshi. They're a Japanese manufacturing company with the knowledge of wet processing separator for lithium-ion batteries. They will be serving North Americans locations across, including North Carolina, Kansas, Tennessee, and Georgia from this location. Construction is expected to start in 2024. This is a huge win for Niagara as a whole. 1,500 good-paying jobs will be generated, with many more in the support sectors. And later this week, I've been invited to participate in a roundtable discussion on rural economic development strategies with provincial and federal ministries on this subject. I'll be there with other businesses from our communities to share our success and develop strategies in growing economic development in communities like ours. On another announcement of capital infrastructure in early May, we were told there would be $1 billion investment in the upgrade of the Sir Adam Beck power plant in Niagara Falls. Many residents receive power from this source. This is excellent news as it secures the future of green energy for the residents of Niagara and West Lincoln well into the future. And on June the 18th, I will be chairing the event, which is going to recognize 50 years of the Niagara Escarpment inception. This event will take place in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And on a local note, following up the presentation here, we're aware of the first public PIC meeting being held here for the North-South Corridor, better known as Bartlett Extension, this Wednesday. So this will be the first steps, as many as we work through this process before submitted through the ministry. And then I wrote down that presentation will be given to this council. So it's obviously happened already this evening. So, and at the Public Works meeting, the mayor and I received a high-level report on some capital projects for West Lincoln, one being the reconstruction of Highway 20, West Street Phase 4, South Grimsby Road 5 to Wade. As councillors know here, it will be a joint project to improve water and sewer capacity and complete this road to an urban design. And secondly was the reconstruction of Region Road 69/20 Mile Road from Victoria Avenue to Rosedene. The second half of this project will be looked at for next year so that it could be completed hopefully next year at this time. So that's my report for this month. So.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And I do believe 5:30 till 8 o'clock, is that the time for the public information session? So again, if members of the public are interested in asking questions or seeing the details about that, then they can go to the Agricultural Centre.
Yeah, I believe
better
it's
known as the Fairgrounds for people who are local, and to the building there. The main building, I presume that's where you'll be. Good, okay. So once again, 5:30 till 8 o'clock on Wednesday evening.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor.
okay.
Okay, that takes us to item number 12, which is confirmation of minutes, the council minutes from April 22nd, 2024. And Councillor Chichok, you have that resolution, please?
After asking for microphones, I better use mine. Moved by myself that the minutes relating to the open session portion of the April 22nd, 2024 council meeting and the recommendations contained therein be accepted, and that the confidential minutes relating to the closed session portion of the April 22nd, 2024 regular council meeting be accepted, and the minutes remain confidential and restricted from public disclosure in accordance with the exemptions provided in Section 239 of the Municipal Act.
Thank you. I need someone to second that, please. Councillor Trombetta. Thank you. All right, and the vote will be in front of you shortly. Oh, it is already, very quickly. Good. And I see Councillor Bradrick's hand is up, so that's good. Okay, so thank you, Councillor Trombetta, if you'll do that. So item 12.2 are the special council minutes from April 29th, and Councillor Trombetta is going to read those.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Moved by myself that the minutes of April 29, 2024 special council meeting and the recommendation contained therein be accepted.
Thank you. And someone to second that? Councillor Riley, thank you. And again, any questions or comments about those special council minutes? Think not. Vote is in front of you.
That carries.
Okay, that resolution carries. And 12.3 are the public meeting minutes under the Planning Act from May 13th, 2024. Councillor Riley, those are yours, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Moved by myself that the minutes of the May 13th, 2024 public meeting held under Section 34 of the Planning Act with respect to 1, part of Lot 4, Range Road 2, Part 1, Plan 30R-16123, Mark and Skelly Staples zoning bylaw amendment, and the recommendations contained therein be accepted.
Thank you. And Councillor Chichok, will you second those as Vice Chair, please? Thank you. And so that vote will be in front of you again shortly.
And that carried.
Okay, and that resolution carries. So item 12.4 are the special council minutes from May 15th, confidential minutes under a separate cover. Councillor Bradrick, would you care to read that, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Moved by myself, 1, that the minutes relating to the open session portion of the May 15, 2024 special council meeting and the recommendations contained therein be accepted, and 2, that the confidential minutes relating to the closed session portion of the May 15, 2024 special council meeting be accepted, and that the minutes remain confidential and restricted from public disclosure in accordance with exemptions provided in the Section 239 of the Municipal Act.
Thank you. I need a seconder for that, please. Councillor Riley, thank you. And the vote is in front of you, members of council. And that also carries, which takes us to communications, 13.1. And Councillor Chichok, you have the resolution, please, for Pride Month of 2024.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Moved by myself. Whereas the month of June is Pride Month in the region of Niagara and around the globe, and whereas municipalities across the region will be holding a variety of Pride commemorations throughout the month of June, commencing with the raising of the Pride flag on Monday, June 3rd. And whereas we recognize that public representation is extremely valuable and is an important way to help all people, and especially marginalized communities, feel safe, welcomed, supported, and valued. And whereas we are committed to fostering a diverse and inclusive community where in all cases, hatred and discrimination are not welcome. Now therefore be it resolved that the Township of West Lincoln Council acknowledges June as Pride Month and encourages the West Lincoln community to unite in support of Pride and of all its members. Further, that the Township of West Lincoln Council endorse the following Pride initiatives in West Lincoln. The Township raising of the Pride flag on Monday, June 3rd, and the sharing of information related to Pride Month in Niagara on all township social media and accounts, and the various Pride events and community engagement opportunities organized by and held at the West Lincoln Public Libraries in June.
Thank you, Councillor. I need someone to second that, please. Councillor Riley, thank you. And the vote is in front of you. And that is also supported. Thank you. Okay. And that takes us to my council mayor's remarks for this month. Pardon me. Since our last council meeting on April 22nd, I have, along with Councillors Bradrick and Riley, spent a great number of hours in reading resumes, candidate discussion meetings, and interviewing the preferred candidates for our Chief Administrative Officer position. Supported by our acting HR staff person, Joanne Shime, and Executive Assistant Jackie Thrower, we were able to bring a selection of excellent candidates before our entire council on May 15th. And I'm pleased to state that this process continues to unfold in an appropriate and timely manner. Interim CAO Donna DeFilippis and I have had several meetings with all members of various organizations as we continue to find out information regarding the role and responsibilities of our municipality in preparation for the International Plowing Match to be held in West Lincoln in September of 2025. I'm happy to report that Councillors Chichok and Riley and I met to reaffirm the details about this year's Citizen Recognition Awards program. The nomination period will begin again this year on Canada Day and will remain open until the first Friday of September. Online and printed nomination forms will be available at Town Hall and at our local libraries, and further details will be out prior to the opening of the nomination period. I met with the Niagara Health team regarding West Lincoln's connection both to Niagara and to Hamilton Health Sciences, and have been reassured that residents requiring health care will receive the same quality, seamless care as the two health teams work closely together. They are not competing entities, I was reassured. I would like to thank our communications specialist, Beth Adet, for helping the Niagara Health team to share information on behalf of the township regarding their public engagement drop-in information area for our area, which actually took place today. It was in Lincoln. So I do hope that some West Lincoln residents were responsive to that invitation and did take part in sharing their thoughts and concerns with the presenters. As mayor, I was pleased to be invited to the 80th anniversary tea for the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital Ladies Auxiliary, and to be able to provide a certificate of congratulations from our township marking that special anniversary. It was amazing to learn about the huge number of volunteers over so many years. Volunteers are always needed, and we were informed that when the new hospital opens next year, that volunteer role will become even more important. John and I attended, by invitation, the Niagara Home Builders Association President's Dinner, where I was pleased to have the opportunity to speak about West Lincoln's current position regarding housing and to encourage home builders to consider both our growth potential and our current need for houses to be built as they make decisions about their future endeavors. I did not attend the Niagara Week reception meetings in Toronto, opting instead to take part in our own meeting in West Lincoln on May 13th. But I do want to publicly thank Regional Councillor Witteveen for representing West Lincoln during those regional meeting days and events in the evenings as well. So I did write my comments yesterday, by the way, with the expectation of having been pulling up the flag today for the Joint Accessible Advisory Committee. But if you recall what this morning was like, it was another pouring down rain day. And so we are now raising that flag at 11 tomorrow. Hopefully the weather will be more cooperative. But we will be acknowledging and celebrating National Accessibility Week. And I will also point out before our next meeting in June that there will be the raising of the Progress Pride flag on Monday, June 3rd. That's been mentioned already, but it will occur at 11:30 a.m. as an indication of our desire to be a safe and supportive community for all. And on Monday, June 10th, the following Monday, the age-friendly flag in honor of Seniors Month will be raised at 10:30 a.m. So members of the public are welcome and in fact encouraged to attend any and all flag-raising ceremonies if they're available to do so. And that concludes my remarks for tonight. And it takes us to committee reports, and the first one is Planning, Building, and Environmental Committee, and Councillor Riley, you have that one.
I do, Madam Mayor. Moved by myself that the minutes relating to the open session portion of the May 13th, 2024 Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting and the recommendations contained therein be accepted, and that the confidential minutes related to the closed session portion of the May 13th, 2024 Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting be accepted, and that the minutes remain confidential and restricted for public disclosure in accordance with Section 239 of the Municipal Act.
Thank you. We need someone to second that, please. Okay, I'm going to go with opposite side this time. Okay, well, I'm going to ask the Vice Chair to actually do that, and the vote will be in front of us. Your turn is coming up, Councillor. Absolutely, to read. Okay, we have a full vote? Okay, so that resolution carries. And so 15.2 is the Administration, Finance, and Fire Committee minutes. And Councillor Trombetta, it is your turn to read those, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Moved by myself that the minutes related to the open session portion of May 21st, 2024 Administration, Finance, and Fire Committee meeting, and that the recommendation contained therein be accepted, and that the confidential minutes relating to the closed session portion of the May 21st, 2024 regular Administration, Finance, and Fire Committee meeting and the recommendations contained therein be accepted, and that the minutes remain confidential and restricted from public disclosure in accordance with Section 239 of the Municipal Act.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Broderick, will you second those, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So the vote is in front of you.
It's all yours, Bill.
Okay, so we will give that to you then, Councillor Riley. Thank you. So 15.3 are the Public Works and Recreation Committee minutes from May 21st. And Councillor Riley, you're going to read those first,
Okay.
please.
Moved by myself that the minutes of the May 21st, 2021 Public Works and Recreation Committee meeting and the recommendations contained therein be accepted.
And Councillor Trombetta, will you second those?
Absolutely, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And so the vote for those will be in front of you. And that resolution carries. So we have nothing for reconsideration tonight, nor do we have a motion to rescind. But that does take us to number 18, which is other business. And Councillor Riley, you have an item on there?
I do.
I will tell you, I'm pleased to see that. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, so I'll start with the recommendation, and then we'll get on the table and we can discuss it.
Okay.
So moved by myself that the staff be directed to send a letter to the Niagara Transit Commission, also known, it says NCT, but I think it's supposed to be NTC, before their June 18, 2024 board meeting to request a review of potential associated costs for implementing an intra-municipal on-demand transit services within the municipality boundaries of West Lincoln.
Thank you for that. Someone to second that motion so we can get it on the floor. Councillor Trombetta, thank you.
Could I just, Madam Mayor,
You want to speak first?
No, I'd like Councillor Riley just to kind of give me a little
well,
background.
that's where
I
I was
didn't know if you
going,
were doing that. I
but
thought
you
you wanted to vote right away.
No,
Sorry, Madam Mayor.
no, we want to discuss
Okay,
it. We
sorry,
want
go
to
ahead.
discuss it.
No
Okay.
worries, no worries.
So, Councillor Riley, please.
All right, perfect. So I'll start by saying that this is certainly not something just unique to West Lincoln. Wainfleet, from what I understand, had just passed pretty much, if not exactly the same, something very similar. So the idea behind this is as the Transit Commission is going to be doing their review and their reporting, they're going to be doing the exact same thing for Wainfleet that they could also be doing with West Lincoln. I guess, you could speak to this as with it being, National Accessibility Week and everything else. This kind of plays on a few notes. I think, it's our opportunity at this point to kind of check the temperature, see what this actually would, how this would impact our municipality, what the options are. That's been a, trial and error process. There's a lot of moving parts to get this where it is now. I know I hear from a lot of residents. Maybe not a lot of residents, but I hear from residents as well as majority businesses that could definitely benefit from having something a little bit more localized. And so I think this is the time that we're not committing to anything. All we're doing is asking them to basically, if they'll consider, the board will consider directing their staff to review it, to see what the cost implications would be and how that would work and present that information back to us at a date that's convenient to them. I think the timing now is about right, and what that would look like ultimately and how the dynamic, or not so much dynamic, sorry, how the makeup of the Transit Commission is now where it was when we were kind of approached this pilot project has changed significantly. So I think this is the right time to at least inquire, get some information, and then have another conversation about this down the road.
Okay. So further to that, I will just add that as well, when they came before us and asked us about that, it was a great monetary ask at the time, and there was no data to show that there would be any use internally within the, so people who are kind of listening from the members of the public or who are reviewing this later, right now you can book the Niagara Transit and you can go from West Lincoln to Grimsby, or you could go to Wainfleet, or you could go anywhere outside of West Lincoln. But if you live inside of West Lincoln, perhaps in Caister Centre, or perhaps in Wellandport, you cannot book it to come into Smithville. So therefore, what we are essentially promoting is the ability to shop outside of our municipality rather than to come to doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, and to come shopping within the municipality itself. So at the time of that formation, and as you say, it was a pilot project, it was going to be 2027 before we would be considered to be included into that. So I do think it's time to start as well. We're growing, we have the potential for growing, and we have people now already requesting that additional service. So it's certainly the time, I think, to start investigating the possibility. And the first step would be to find out what the monetary connection would be and whether it's even feasible within their plans for us to be able to do that. So thank you for bringing that forward.
If I could also mention too, I think the optics of it are a lot different now too, because of how the region is the final decision maker in that too. So the request to come to us to understand what the cost implications could be ultimately will still fall back on the regional connection, which is yourself and Councilor Weatherby would have to advocate for should the information come back and be reasonable. And so I think it's, what we could have done then, I think we made the right decision then. Now I think it's the appropriate time to kind of test the waters again and see where that goes for how that works. Is it's probably going to not be as quick as a adjustment if it is something we feel that we need, because there's more, I don't know, lack of a better way of phrasing it, more red tape in a way maybe right now with having to get the board to review it, put their recommendation forward, and then have regional council support it. Ultimately would be the roadmap of how this is going to be successful.
So essentially, we're starting a discussion, which is important. Okay, any questions or other comments? Councillor Trombetta, no?
No. Filled me in.
Councillor Bradrick, any questions or comments from you?
I'm very excited to see this come forward. There's certainly an increase in, buzz in the community in regards to this service, and a little bit of frustration on the fact that the intra is not available to residents. So I'm glad to see this come forward and look forward to the time coming when we find out more information.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we will vote on that resolution. Oh, you changed it, okay, so he did correct it. Okay. Thank you, okay. And that carries. Good, okay. So 18.2 is for members of council with any remarks they wish to make. So Councillor Chichok, shall we start on your side?
Nothing, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Riley, nothing? Madam CAO, anything? Councillor Trombetta?
We did have our first annual Penn West meeting with myself, Mayor, Mr. Brian Walker, Mr. Hildebrand, and two councillors, Lynn Timmers and Russell, and Kevin Kerr from Pelham. It was an informative meeting. We're still meeting, yearly, and that went well. A couple things coming up, and I still let everybody know as we progress further in through the year of a couple changes coming down in Penn West. But we did meet, so it was good to have the whole committee there actually here, and the Madam Mayor was a part of that meeting. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Braddock, anything this evening?
Nothing, thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So, new items of business, and I believe our clerk has something, so go ahead.
So I have a new item of business for council. So in order to put a new item of business on the floor, I would need a mover and seconder from council to even entertain it. So it is in regards to councillor attendance requirements.
Okay, so I'll move that.
Okay.
And second it, Councillor Chichok. Okay, so, so the first vote is just to get a new item of business on the table, and so that's what this vote will be about. So we have a mover and a seconder.
Is it Councillor Chichok who seconded it? Sorry.
Councillor Chichok?
Okay.
Yes, she did.
Okay. That vote will be in front of you.
Okay, so there's a vote in front of you shortly to entertain a new item of business. And it's there.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, so you have that resolution, Mr. Clerk, and so now?
You will have to give me 1 second, but I'm going to move that we move into closed session to deal with a counselor attendance requirement, and it's going to fall under personal matters section of the exemption list to go into closed. This vote will be in front of you in a second. I just need to prepare it.
Okay. So we need a mover. Councillor Trombetta, can I ask you to move going into closed briefly? And Councillor Chichok to second that, please?
I did.
No, this is a new one. This time is just to go into closed. Just when you thought.
Just when you thought it made a quick night.
I'm just going to say she is.
Councilor Broderick staying, or we have to go to the other?
Okay,
We'll stay here. So that carried.
yeah, okay. Okay, so, yeah, okay, so we're moving into closed session briefly.
No, we can stay. We can
Can we
stay here.
say, do you want
We don't-
everybody else to have to leave? Or do you want us to just go next door for a few minutes?
We can stay here just because we need her for Zoom.
Okay. Okay, so unfortunately, to everybody else, we need to have Shelley on Zoom, so we have to ask you to all vacate for a few minutes. Okay, thank you. So we're back in open session, and we have a resolution, Mr. Clerk, to accept. Would you like to?
So the resolution reads as follows, that council receive confidential item 19.1 for information.
Thank you. And a mover for that? Councillor Chichok, and the seconder, Councillor Riley. All in favor? And that resolution carries. Thank you, Shelley. Okay, so that finally then takes us to bylaws, and Councillor Trombetta, you have the resolution, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Moved by myself that leave be granted to introduce bylaws 2024-31, 2024-32, 2024-33, 2024-34, 2024-35, and 2024-36, and that the same shall be considered and been read a first, second, and third time with one reading and are hereby adopted, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign in and affix corporate seal thereto any other rule to this council to the contrary notwithstanding.
Thank you. And Councillor Bradrick, you're willing to second that, I hope?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So the vote will be in front of us. Okay. And that resolution carries, and that takes us to the end of the meeting. So I will declare this meeting adjourned at the hour of 9:01 p.m.